The highest paying finance careers. What are they? How much do they pay? And how would someone who's actually worked in finance for quite some time rank them? The good news is that I have friends in most of these career paths, and so we're going to be talking about accurate insider salary numbers. The only reason I'm mentioning that is I happened to be scrolling on YouTube and saw one of the most viewed finance tier lists out there, and it just happened to have random job titles instead of actual career paths. And in addition to that, there were just extremely off salary ranges. And so I figured that it's my duty to make the official one above all finance career tier list. Now, just remember, I'm going to be ranking these mainly based on compensation, but if you do happen to disagree with any of these, let me know in the comments down below. Corporate development and investor relations. This is a super interesting one because they're what I define as the higher tier corporate finance roles. I'd say people typically view these as the more prestigious roles to go into within corporate finance, strictly for the fact that mergers and acquisitions is a heavy part of corporate development. And then for investor relations, you're really talking to investors a lot, creating memos and going out to conferences to meet with them. Usually you've spent a few years within the corporate world or came out of an MBA or out of IB and then jump into these. But either way, when you enter, you make somewhere around 120K to around 160K total compensation. I'm also going to mention the late career compensation for all of the career paths that we talk about. This is not like the maximum that you could achieve within that career path. It's more so what I'm viewing as the 10 to 15 years down the road, typically at a director level within most of these careers. And so for that late career in IR or corp dev, it's really going to be around the 350 to 450K level. With that in mind, corp dev and IR make a very good amount. They have a lot of interesting work that you're involved in. And so for that reason, I'm going to be placing them within the B tier. Management consulting, or also known as MBB consulting. This is our first, I actually just want to be rich and I'm willing to make a lot of sacrifices for it career path. And although this isn't purely a finance role, this is what I'd consider a finance adjacent role in which many people in the business or finance world eventually consider along the way throughout their career. As I mentioned earlier, when someone says management consulting, they're typically referring to MBB consulting, which stands for McKinsey, Bain & Company, and Boston Consulting Group, which are the three largest management consulting firms in the world. Obviously, there's other boutiques, but these guys specifically have a hilarious reputation, largely a result of the many TikTok memes out there about consultants.
What type of work do you do at McKinsey?
My focus these days is helping clients across industries with their e-commerce problems.
Like what specifically do you do?
Helping clients across those industries solve e-commerce.
I wouldn't really have expertise in the problems that we were trying to solve.
So where did you get the expertise?
Absolutely, and it's a rather disconcerting, befuddling, bamboozling question you're asking. To get to the nucleus of the question, we must first ask ourselves, what is the crux?
Basically, they're viewed by the general public as some of the most overpaid people in the business world. And that's largely due to a lot of news stories like the one in which the city of New York paid $4 million to have McKinsey come in and help them with their trash issue. And the solution that they came up with was, well, it was trash cans. But in reality, though, the work that they do is typically a lot more thorough and detailed than that. It involves going to a company that has a serious business issue in which the leaders don't know how to solve, coming there and creating a step-by-step solution for how that business can tackle that problem. These guys work around 65 hours a week and are traveling constantly from business to business. And if you're into that kind of thing, that's great for you. It's probably the right role that you're looking for. For a lot of people, the lack of routine within management consulting just scares them away. And the starting salary for management consultants is actually around $230,000. But the catch with that is you're typically coming out of an MBA program going into one of these MBB companies. The late career, though, of a management consulting is why they're going to be the first career path placed within the S tier, and that's strictly because management consultants make a whopping $1 million or more towards that 10 to 15 year mark within their career. Now, a ton of people burn out, but if you're one of the few who could struggle it out, then you are pretty much setting up your family for life. All right, FP&A and Treasury. If you're not familiar, I am within FP&A, and so I have a slight bias to it, but overall high level, FP&A is a field where you're focused on forecasting the financial metrics of a company, and typically the team responsible for building the budgets and working with all the teams around the company. But if you're anything like me, I typically don't like the FP&A roles that are like bean counting, specifically where you're just dealing with budgets and more so the strategic related roles where you're helping to make decisions for the long-term vision of that company. Now, Treasury I'm bundling in here because it's on the same pay scale, and I would define Treasury with FP&A as being in that lower corporate finance tier in comparison to Corp Dev and IR, but both still pay exceptionally well for the amount that you work. Now, in Treasury, you're typically responsible for ensuring the company has cash at the right place at the right time, and I would say in a more established company, it's typically more chill than the FP&A role path. Now, although that's the case for established businesses, that really just depends on the kind of business. If you're within an earlier stage banking company, Treasury is probably going to be really intense there, especially since it'll most likely have a leaner team. At the entry level in both of these roles, I would expect you to make anywhere from $75,000 to $85,000 starting out. And in that late career, 10 to 15 years down the road, at maybe a director level, I would expect you to make a total compensation of around $300,000. For those reasons, we're going to go ahead and place FP&A and Treasury within the C tier. Accounting, tax, and audit. I'm bundling these all together. The typical route for someone within the accounting major starting out is going into a Big Four company and going into either audit or tax. So let's say you start out within Deloitte in tax or audit. This is called going into the public sector because you're not working internally for a company, but instead you're working externally and helping other companies, kind of like consulting with their audit or tax work. Typically, people go into this road for a few perks that it offers. The main two being that one, you're going to grow a very large network because you're working with so many other people within the Big Four. And then secondly, or the main benefit that comes with this is that private sector companies, or most of the companies that you're familiar with, seek out people to come from the Big Four to go work for them. Now, they might not just seek you out to go into internal audit or tax. You could also be going into a more corporate accounting role. So there's a lot of interesting exit opportunities for those in Big Four who want to go that typical accounting route. If you start in this Big Four route, I would expect you to make around $70,000 on average as total compensation. And late career, you're looking at somewhere around $260K. I know in the thumbnail I placed these guys within the F tier, and obviously that is just me clickbaiting. I wouldn't do you accountants like that, and so I'm going to be placing them within the bottom in the D tier.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
In all seriousness, this is strictly because the private accounting or public accounting route typically has worse hours for lower compensation than the corporate finance route. And so for those reasons, I just don't place it on the same tier as something like FP&A or Treasury. Now, if I was an accounting major really set on pursuing the Big Four route, then I would be looking to go into consulting or advisory. In Big Four consulting, they have a very similar nature to MBB consulting, where they're tackling a specific problem for another company, but it's not on the same level as something like McKinsey, where you're overall uphauling an entirely new strategy for the business, but more so the company has a specific problem that Big Four consultants come in to help out with. If you're interested in consulting but don't want to work the harsh hours or do the work that it takes to get into an MBB company, Big Four consulting, I think, is a great way to start your career because they pay around $90K all-in compensation starting out and end up somewhere around the $330 to $350K range towards the late stage of your career. And so for those reasons, I would put them within the B tier behind Corp Dev and IR. Compliance is a finance adjacent career. I'm going to keep it short on this one. It's essentially looking to make sure that the corporation adheres to local laws, regulations, policies, whatever. There's a lot of different branches and areas within compliance, but a good example is like on the know your customer side of compliance, you're responsible for assessing a customer's risk before onboarding them as a client of yours into the business. The great thing about compliance is it has an amazing work-life balance for the most part and starts at around $75K all in. Again, for the late career numbers, this is not the end all be all. There's definitely compliance chief officers making $700,000, but $300,000 is what I'd quote you should expect to make at 10 years or 15 years down the road if you're just kind of making your way up that ladder. I'm going to be putting compliance within the C tier below FP&A and Treasury. Investment banking is on the sell side, and it's probably the most famous path within all of finance, and that's probably because it allows you exit opportunities into almost any other career path you want to go into within the realm of finance or business. What they essentially do at a high level is help companies raise capital or go through an IPO, or on the other hand, help companies either merge with or acquire other businesses and work on live deals revolving around that. Sometimes people don't consider that investment banking can just be the career path that you stay on if you like it. You don't necessarily have to look for an exit opportunity. Now, if you're going to pursue investment banking, understand what you're really getting into. You will work on average 80 to 110 or even 120 hours a week. Now, not all of these hours are hours where you're sitting in an Excel spreadsheet at your desk. Some of these hours, maybe dozens or more a week, could be where you're sitting around waiting for something from your boss to come down late at night. And so, although those might sound like chill hours of the day, in reality, you're just waiting, not able to commit to other activities because you're still technically on call. If you're signing up for investment banking, you're technically signing up to sacrifice your social life, sacrifice your relationships, your physical and mental health, and even your sleep. Now, even 2 years of investment banking can really mess up your health. So just know if you go into this path, it's not that easy to just come out of it and reverse the effects of stress, at least immediately. Now, if none of that has scared you away and you are equally just as hungry to prioritize the opportunities that investment banking allows for, then it probably is just the right career path for you. When you go into investment banking at a bulge bracket bank, you can most likely expect to make anywhere around $230,000 total compensation. Now, late career, you're looking to make anywhere from $800K to around $1 million USD a year. And I'm going to be placing them within the A tier strictly because there's other careers where you can make equally as much that we've talked about and are going to talk about that have less stress and less hours involved within them. And that's typically why people don't stick to investment banking and exit elsewhere. Hedge funds, venture capital, and private equity. I'm bulking these three together because most people who are looking to go into finance know these as the exit opportunities that investment banking can grant you, but don't really need to know too much about the details of them until you are already within investment banking. I place equal prestige on all three of these, and you don't really need to know about the pros and cons of them, but just know that any three of these is a great choice. It just really depends on your overall preference and what you like to do. Now, even before telling you the compensations of them, I'm just going to immediately go ahead and place hedge funds, private equity, and venture capital within the S tier above consulting. And before we talk about how much they make, let me just tell you briefly what they do. Hedge funds are large investment funds that try to invest in public assets to attempt to beat the market. Now, private equity and venture capital are very similar. I'd actually say that venture capital is just a subset of private equity. Essentially, what private equity does is raise capital from outside investors, invest that into buying a private company, build that company up, and then sell that company for a profit. Now, venture capital is a subset of private equity because they essentially do the same thing, except they invest in very early stage companies. And their main goal is to have the winners that they invest in to make up for the losses. Now, in private equity, you might focus on investing into established companies that have solid financials, whereas within venture capital, you might not know the financial future, but you're investing in the potential and strictly investing in the founders or the people behind that company. Now, for all three of these career paths, you're typically coming out of multiple years of investment banking or an MBA. Now, PE and VC make around 200K to 350K, and typically VC makes less initially than PE, but later down the road you get carry, which is essentially a percentage of the returns from investments, and that's where they start to match in terms of how much you make. And now with hedge funds, you make somewhere around 250 all the way to 600K. And so for that reason, I'm going to place them within S tier as we already did, but in specifically the order that they're listed right here. Hedge funds first, and then private equity, and then venture capital. But again, this all depends on your preference. And at the end of the day, if you're in any of these, you're going to be making anywhere from $1 million or more late career. Commercial banking and corporate banking, they're both so similar that we could talk about them at the same time. Essentially, corporate banking and commercial banking, they both focus on helping companies with their financial services such as credit, cash management, or loans. The difference between the two, though, is that corporate banking essentially works on larger businesses like really big financial institutions, whereas in commercial banking, you're more so focused on small to mid-sized businesses. Corporate bankers, in a lot of instances, actually roll up into the same wheelhouse as investment bankers and are typically within some of the main bulge bracket banks as them. And so they have a higher sense of prestige. They also have more hours that they work, but also higher pay. So with that, if you're in corporate banking and you're a part of the investment banking organization, then you're looking to make somewhere around 150K all in starting out. Late stage for corporate banking, you're going to be around $500,000 to $600,000 all in, which easily places them within the B tier, and I'm going to place them at the top of the B tier. Then commercial banking, as I said, it has better hours, it has less prestige, but it also has pretty decent pay for the amount of hours that you're working. A lot of my friends within commercial banking work around 40 hours a week. They start at around 85K to 95K and work their way up to late career to somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000. And so for those reasons, I'm going to place commercial banking all the way at the top of our C tier. Quant. Also known as being a quantitative hedge fund analyst, trader, researcher, developer. There's a bunch of different roles within the world of quant, but essentially, just straight off the bat, quant is our meta career path. Now, becoming a quant and going into quant finance is extremely difficult. Typically, the people who go into quant are not from a finance background. It's definitely a finance adjacent career because you're working at a hedge fund, but these individuals usually come from backgrounds of strong mathematics, statistics, maybe higher computer science, or even physics. The main thing that you need to know if you want to break into quant eventually is that these guys are very bright and advanced mathematically, highly intelligent, extremely good looking, super funny, very muscular. No, in all seriousness, this really is one of the most difficult roles out there, just in the corporate world in general, to get. But if you're going into a large quantitative hedge fund, think of 2 Sigma, you are going to be looking at making insane amounts of money. I'm talking, if you haven't heard of quant roles, the amount of money that they make is just unheard of. Some quant traders or researchers come straight out of a PhD, but it is actually possible to go straight out of undergrad. And if you do, you're looking to make 300 to 400K total compensation a year. And at end career, they're looking at somewhere around $1 million or more. And when I say end career, actually, that you could be looking to make $1 million within your first 5 years as a quant. And I've actually heard of certain people, not friends of mine, but certain individuals who have made $5 million, if not $10 million or more, being one of the top quants within their hedge fund. It's insane. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's not unheard of because within the quant field, you're getting performance bonuses based on the amount of returns that you generate for the fund. So it's not unheard of to get a large percent of your return back as a form of compensation. And so if you're really good and you're really into mathematics, this is probably the #1 field that I would push you to pursue, because if you have a background in this, you could probably get any of the other finance careers out there as well. Financial planning and private wealth managers can be talked about at the same time because they essentially do the same thing. It's just the level of clients that they do it for differs quite a bit. As the name suggests, in private wealth management, you're typically managing the funds of very wealthy clients, but on top of that, you're managing their real estate planning and also their tax issues, their estate planning, just a bunch of other things that you typically wouldn't consider as a financial planner. They both offer you the ability to go ahead and make your own practice one day. Since they're typically more of a sales type of role, you can own the relationship with your clients, and eventually if you have your own practice, you can take in the entire revenue from your clients as well. That's a lot easier said than done, but if you are able to do that, then the numbers that I'm going to provide here are actually understated. Again, with financial planning and especially private wealth management, you have an uncapped salary. The amount that you make is really strictly upon you. And if you have your own practice, it can be upwards of over $1 million. That's not unreasonable. Now, they're both typically going to start at the same range, and this is a wide range, but around $60,000 to $90,000 is what I've seen. And for most financial planners, you're not going to be going too much over the $200,000 to $300,000 range. For those reasons, I'm placing financial planners within C tier. Now, on the other hand, private wealth manager salaries, as I mentioned, are uncapped, and so it's not unreasonable to expect you to make $400,000 or more if you've gone over the hurdle of grinding out this career in the first 5 to 10 years and build yourself a solid base of clients. So all in all, private wealth management definitely belongs within the B tier. Asset managers usually manage the investment portfolios of their clients, usually other institutions or large groups. They usually work in investment companies that you've most likely heard of, like Fidelity, Vanguard, or BlackRock. They're honestly a really underrated career path that's kind of like a mix of sales, but also a really strong focus on the finance aspect. And if you're really into investing, this is the #1 path that I'd recommend you go into. And on top of that, they start out at anywhere from $90,000 all the way up to even $100,000 or more. If you make it into one of the biggest asset managers like BlackRock, it's not unheard of to be making over $120,000 straight out of undergrad. Now, the end career within asset management can have you making anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 or more. But if you're really good at what you do, again, this is slightly sales focused, you could be making anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million or more as well. And with that said, I'm going to be placing asset management within the A tier, guys, and that will officially complete our tier list. And as I said earlier, I really enjoyed making this first of all, but I would love to get your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? If you're looking to make a ton of money, but also don't want to work crazy, insane hours forever, then asset management is really one of the best career paths out there. And if you're really wanting to learn more about it, along with some of the other top ranked career paths within finance that have a decent work-life balance, then definitely click on this video right here where I go full into details on what those career paths are, what they do, and how much they make. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. And until next time, talk soon.